Hello, and welcome to our second session of the AI conference today in the future of health. I'd like to welcome Zeenat Patrawala, VP of Onc.AI, and our moderator, Julia Collins, founder and CEO of Planet Forward. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having us. And thanks to the MIT Club of Northern California and everyone for tuning in. It is such a joy to be here with my dear, dear friend and fellow badass, Zeenat Patrawala. Zeenat recently joined a fellow MIT classmate at Onc.AI, where she serves as vice president. Onc.AI is using artificial intelligence to bring clarity to cancer treatment decisions. For those of you who don't know Zeenat, she has spent her career in biopharma and healthcare, coupled with machine learning, and in more recent years has lent her expertise to organizations like Salesforce, Google, and Raptor Pharmaceuticals. Zeenat was a founding member of Google Health, leading business and partner development in consumer health products. And in the 2 years prior, she worked at the Machine and AI Research Institute for Google Brain. While there, she was instrumental in driving forward the healthcare initiative at Google to provide best-in-class machine learning tools to a host of healthcare applications, including diagnosing various diseases through computer vision technology, cell painting technology for drug discovery, and using machine learning on unstructured EHR data, to name just a few of the core projects that she worked on. Zeenat, it's so great to see you. And it's clear that you have a wealth of information and experience when it comes to machine learning and AI in the space of healthcare. Can you share a little bit more with the audience about why you chose this path?
Of course, and to start, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I've just recently started this new career journey, joining a founding team of an early stage company. And Julia, our friendship actually led me to making this choice. So thank you for all of your support on my career journey. But to get started here, just as a quick background to how I ended up at this intersection of healthcare and machine learning. I had, prior to joining Google, spent my career predominantly in biopharma. My background is in the life sciences. And at Raptor Pharmaceuticals, we were working on developing therapeutics for ultra rare diseases. And we were specifically working with the pediatric patient population. And a lot of the diseases that we were working in, for instance, in NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, the core ability to even diagnose that a patient has this disease is through a liver biopsy. That's the standard of care. In terms of what does a biopsy entail, it's basically taking a piece of your liver, through an extraction that requires, an invasive procedure. So it's a needle that goes through the body to extract the tissue. And as you can imagine, when you're looking for pediatric patients, it's a very, very tough and invasive treatment just to even find out if the patient has this disease. Another issue that we found in this space working in rare diseases is that there was an education that was required to even prompt a lot of caretakers and physicians to be aware that NASH was a potential diagnosis, because many of these diseases had multiple comorbidities and or the patient was asymptomatic. So basically, the end point of this is that it was really hard to even find patients to begin to develop the studies needed to find treatments for them. So, as I was working in this space, we were doing a lot of research on other non-invasive ways to screen and diagnose patients. And some of the work that we were exploring was research opportunities trying to utilize machine learning. And after we sold Raptor to Horizon, I became really interested in what computer vision and machine learning could do for our field. and realized very quickly, Julia, that I had no understanding what artificial intelligence really meant. I didn't have a background in computer science. I hadn't participated in the field since, my high school days of taking some classes here and there. So I decided to really go deep in the field and join the Google team, where I had the opportunity to work with the leading computer vision experts, and then really begin to think and tailor what that technology brought to bear and how it could actually be applied to healthcare problems and be translated to business products and business problems, which I think I'd love to sort of explore more. It's kind of the core theme here is how do you translate this really amazing technology into applicable products?
Yeah. And so just kind of pulling on that thread a little bit more and thinking about sort of the importance of the technology and the importance of being able to apply it against a business problem. Tell me a little bit more about the current state of machine learning in the healthcare space. What do you see happening? What are you excited about right now?
Yeah, great question. So where are we today? I think that we've been engaged in this field for quite a long time now, 5+ years. There's been an enormous amount of investment. So we've clearly discussed in a lot of these conferences the potential for artificial intelligence to garner meaningful predictive information from medical data. There's been a whole field in longitudinal data sets, and the area that I'm most interested is in image biomarkers. I think the core next phase of this work is really going to be moving past the potential and the research, and actually being able to build meaningful healthcare products that showcase the power of machine learning, and that it can indeed improve the field and provide two clear success paths that we define in healthcare. One very clearly being, do we improve clinical outcome? And the second one is, do we decrease cost? I mean, that I think is a core need as we're looking at, an increasing and unsurmountable healthcare burden, especially in the US. So let me provide a couple of examples, Julia, of companies that have actually gotten to the patient and brought products to bear in this field. The first one is HeartFlow, and to start with, they had a very, very clear problem that they were addressing. They were trying to provide accurate information for cardiologists around the treatment plan for patients with heart diseases. One of the issues is that, if you are having any symptoms of a potential heart disease or cardiovascular issue, the next step is to provide an angiogram, which is an invasive test to determine whether or not your arteries are clogged. And there's a lot of work that was shown, specifically a paper in 2014 that showed that, the majority of these angiograms that were performed didn't actually bear information that was meaningful or that showcased that the arteries were clogged. And so, the question was, is angiograms the right next step to determine whether or not a patient had a clogged arteries? And was there another, non-invasive way for us to get to that question? And so they developed a tool that, from CT images can actually determine and provide a predictive information as to whether or not an artery was clogged and if an angiogram was needed. And what their product showed is that 61% of angiograms can be deferred, and that there were no adverse effects to this angiogram. So really, really powerful and very quick information at the fingertips for cardiologists to make these determinations prior to putting patients under, stressful and extreme set of circumstances.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about these non-invasive ways to be able to get the kind of information that we need to make care plans for patients. Talk to me a little bit about, you've seen this whole trajectory. You've seen this first massive wave of investment in research projects in healthcare. What do you think some of the learnings are from that first massive wave of investment, and where do you think the conversation is moving toward at this point?
Yeah, I kind of shared this question with a couple of my colleagues for us to kind of get around the table to talk through this. And I think that the biggest thing that we discussed is this is really hard in healthcare for the core reason that we have no control over the data, how it's collected, how we get it. We're not the providers of that data. So for instance, in other fields, Julia, I know that you ran a technology company at Zoom Pizza that had a lot of machine learning and data analytics on the back end of it. In some of these other fields like yours or like autonomous cars, you are generating the data. You have full control of the data. You have full control of where the sensors are placed, how the data is collected, what time the data is collected. In healthcare, we don't have any of that. And it's a really disparate system and machines and treatment plans from hospital to hospital, from individual patient to individual patient across, global healthcare systems. So what it requires on the engineering side, a lot of creativity on how to build these machine learning models, a lot more trial and error, and you can't control your data with simple machine learning models like you can in other fields.
Yeah, that certainly poses quite a challenge. And I can see how, when an organization has the ability to control its data and, from end to end, that leads to a different set of outcomes than if the data is distributed across various stakeholders and has to be pieced together. That certainly sounds like one of the obstacles that you're seeing in the space. What are some of the other obstacles in the industry and the development of some of the technologies that you're working on so far?
Yeah, a couple other things that came to mind is, what is the actual problem where we're looking to solve? And is there a translatable business opportunity? This is a highly regulated industry that requires multiple steps. So, the first hurdle you need to get through is approval by the FDA. And I think one of the things that I've seen in my career is that the FDA has actually been a fantastic participant in this conversation and building out guidelines around how to utilize artificial intelligence. But there is a core difference, because in most medical device companies, once you build the device and it's deemed to be safe, that device is kind of a single stopping point, and then the device is used in the ecosystem. Here, AI provides continuous training and continuous models and a continuous adaptation. And how do you take that continuous learning approach, in a regulated industry and ensure that it's safe and efficacious for use by patients? So that's another large hurdle. And then, a second one is, we also have a system of, even once you get approval, your reimbursement or who pays for it is structurally different. It's, there's a whole system by the payers and the insurance companies, and really being able to showcase to them meaningful evidence-based studies that showcase that this information and this data set that's coming out is actually meaningful to improving patient outcome and reducing costs, and then it's efficacious. So there are multiple steps that need to be taken, beyond just the predictive information to get you to a revenue positive and productive product in the healthcare ecosystem that can be used.
Yeah, this is a really good overview of some of the obstacles, some of the learnings from the first wave of investment. So I really want to hear from you about what's the future of machine learning in the healthcare space, and how can it help researchers, physicians, and patients? Do you have any examples of some things that you're seeing that represent the future of this work?
Yeah, I think that the field is actually getting much narrower as to the problem sets that are really applicable for machine learning and AI. I think that, when you look at, for instance, image biomarkers and the ability to detect abnormalities that are not readable by the visible human eye, it's not as effective if it's so broad scale. You have to be very, very clear as to what you're looking for, what disease you're looking for, and is it representative of the entire, for instance, in oncology, tumor burden. So a lot more thought is being placed into the questions that are being used to influence how to incorporate machine learning into building these image biomarkers. The second one is speed. I think that speed is also a core component of this, and being able to partner with the right institutions to bring on board meaningful patient data to build these algorithms around. Overall, stakeholders are looking for therapies that provide evidence of incremental benefit over existing options. So it's not just good enough that the machine learning algorithm provides information. It has to be better than what is currently standard of care.
Right. That makes a tremendous amount of sense. Well, I know that there are going to be some questions from the audience, and I'd love to be able to hear what's on everyone's minds. But before we kick it over to the audience Q&A, is there anything else, Zeenat, that's on your mind that you want to share?
I think the last point that, I'm really looking forward to sharing with this audience is, the power of image biomarkers in oncology and what that future holds. So stay tuned, that's going to be my future work.
Excellent. This has been absolutely fascinating. Fatty, are there any questions from the audience that we want to field? Or if not, Zeenat and I are happy to keep going.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you guys for your time. We do have one that just popped up from Simon D. With current trends and sensitivities around data privacy, how do you see the impact on this field? Is this slowing down progress in the US and EU, for example?
Yeah, no, Simon, thank you. It's a great question. And I would actually state that it's already on the forefront for the past couple years of all company, all researchers, all healthcare professionals that are working in this field. Patient privacy and de-identification has to be at the forefront. It has to not only put the patient and their needs at the best interest, and it has to comply by individual government agencies of how we think about these things. So in terms of providing meaningful examples, does it slow down progress? From my perspective, I actually don't believe it slows down progress. I think what it drives is a meaningful bi-directional partnership and relationship between the healthcare institutions who are caring for the patients and the teams that are working on developing machine learning algorithms. That initiation of a conversation, that insurance upfront of what are the priorities, how to ingest the data and ensure that it abides by all privacy requirements, that has to be part of your core upfront conversation. And I think it's just driving it in the beginning.
Wonderful, thank you for that. We don't have any other questions at this moment. So if you guys want to chat about a couple other things, we've got some minutes to do so.
Yeah, I'm actually really interested to know, Zeenat, from your perspective, if there are any applications for machine learning technology that we can think about within the context of COVID-19, either diagnosis or treatment.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I've been thinking about. I mean, the one example that I can provide is there's quite a bit of work being done at the University of San Diego that's using patients' CT scans because the virus attacks the liver. So it's a respiratory disease, to manage the prognosis and an understanding of what's happening and how to treat the patient when they're already diagnosed with COVID in the hospital setting. So it's providing real-time information and insight to better adapt and address the patient treatment plan. That's one example of how we're utilizing and how people have spun up machine learning classifiers on the spot in the last 4 months to address this pandemic. Yes, there's a lot more future opportunities here. I think that's the one example that I can speak to at this time.
That makes a lot of sense. I wonder also, just, you have spent so much time at the intersection of, of business and science. And there can often be this tension point where folks don't know how to translate what's happening in terms of the scientific application of the technology and then the business application. It can be a place where a lot of great businesses kind of fall apart. How do you, as a scientist, first and foremost, really arm the business people that you work with to be able to make the right business decisions?
Yeah, Julia, I am flattered that you called me a scientist first and foremost. I think that those days are long gone. I have clearly translated into a business-minded individual. And, in addressing this, I think that, it comes down to what is the problem that you're solving? And does it address, I sound a little bit like a broken record, but does it address two core areas? Does it improve the patient's outcome? Do they actually get better? And can we track that and see that in real time? And, does it have a change in cost? And maybe a third parameter that you can put on there, besides cost is, does it easily work into the workflow of the way that people work in healthcare? Because there's a change behavior component of this, and you want to make it as lightweight and easy for physicians to use as they go through their current workflow and in managing a disease. So I think like having that, continuously asking yourself that question as you're building or working on really cool science is really, really critical, because that is the breaking point of not getting through into the clinic. And I would also say that, being narrowly focused on your problem can be very powerful.
Is this why you're so excited about image biomarkers? Because they can both dramatically improve patient outcomes and reduce cost? Or tell me a little bit more about framing it within the context of some things that you're working on.
Yeah, without speaking to what we're doing at Onc.AI, I think those were the two key questions that we were asking ourselves from the get-go when we began evaluating and looking at this opportunity in oncology. Could we really predict and improve an oncology patient's treatment plan, first and foremost? And we know, especially in immuno-oncology, it's extraordinarily expensive treatments. Can we actually ensure that patients are either on the right treatment, or if they're not going to benefit, what other options do they have, and how do we ensure that reduction of cost? So this has been the key questions that I think myself and my team are asking every day.
And as you begin to translate this conversation, not just within the context of the company, but with the investment community, are you finding that investors understand fundamentally the problem that you're trying to solve?
Julia, this is such a longer conversation to be had, I think, in a couple minutes here. I do believe it's being translated correctly. I do believe that there is, differences in depending on who your investor community is, if you're talking to a life science investor versus a tech investor. But I think since there's been a blending of the two types of investors in this field over the past few years, there's been an up-leveling of understanding what it takes to get a healthcare product in the market.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're sort of coming to the end of our time. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom.
Thank you. And thank you to the MIT community for inviting me to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Zeenat and Julia. I completely agree that you're both badasses. Julia, thank you for that intro. And thank you guys for leading as you do. We appreciate your time and your fascinating work and telling us about it. For our viewers, we encourage everyone to join our Slack channel for further conversation with some of our speakers and attendees. And for our viewers, also please stick around for the next session that will start